He couldn't speak. But the way he looked at Malachi made him wish he would. The chandelier above the ballroom was too bright. Too gold. Too much of everything that didn't belong to people like Malachi Doss, a 22-year-old trying to hold his life together with a part-time paycheck and a hospital bill he hadn't opened yet. He pressed himself against the far wall, silver tray balanced in both hands, eyes straight ahead. That's what the head of staff told him. Eyes ahead. Stay invisible. Don't draw attention to the guests, and for the love of everything, don't let them draw attention to you. Hi viewers, if someone was being humiliated right in front of you and you had the power to stop it, would you? Drop your answer in the comments. He should have kept his eyes ahead. But then Ridian laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was the kind that filled up a room and pushed everyone else to the edges of it. Ridian Voss. Guest, heir to something Malachi hadn't bothered to learn, dressed in white like he never touched anything dirty in his life, was standing in the middle of that ballroom like he owned the floor beneath it. And Soren was 3 feet in front of him. Soren, quiet, precise, unreadable Soren, stood with a folded linen in his hands, waiting to be dismissed. His posture was clean. His face gave away nothing. He didn't look nervous. That made it worse. You know what I love about him? Ridian said to the man beside him, voice loud enough that the nearest cluster of guests went still. He was talking about Soren like Soren wasn't standing right there. You can say whatever you want. He can't do anything about it. A beat. Nobody moved. Ridian reached out and pressed 2 fingers under Soren's chin, tilting his face up. Slow. Deliberate. Soren didn't flinch. Malachi's grip tightened on the tray. Look at that, Ridian said softly. Completely empty. There's nobody home. He released Soren's chin with a small flick, like he was moving a piece of furniture out of his way. Then he looked around the room, at the staff, at the guests, at the gold walls, and smiled. Like he was waiting for applause. Malachi's eyes dropped to Soren's hands. Still. Perfectly still. And then, just once, Soren's gaze shifted. Not toward Ridian. Not toward the exit. Toward Malachi. The look lasted maybe 2 seconds. No fear in it. No humiliation. Just something cold and flat and completely focused. Like he was filing Malachi away. Cataloging him. Then it was gone. Soren turned back to his station. Ridian was already moving on, laughing at something else. The room exhaled. Malachi stood in his corner with that tray in his hands and didn't say a single word. From somewhere near the far archway, a man in black watched the entire exchange without blinking. Cale Moreau, owner of the estate, head of everything that ran through these walls, stood with his hands folded behind him and said nothing. Did nothing. And somehow, that was the part that stayed with Malachi the longest. The next morning, Malachi's assigned workspace moved. Nobody explained it. A staff supervisor pointed to a new room, half office, half storage, and told him his schedule had been adjusted to overlap with Soren's rotation. Shared duties. Shared space. No further questions. Malachi didn't ask any. Soren was already there when he arrived. He was reorganizing supply drawers in silence, moving each item like it had a specific place, and he'd already memorized the map. No wasted motion. No glancing up. Malachi set his bag down on the opposite end of the table and waited for some kind of acknowledgement. Nothing. Morning, Malachi said. Soren didn't respond. Not a nod, not a shift in posture. Just continued moving. Malachi cleared his throat. Tried again. I'm Malachi. I know we've been in the same building for a few weeks, but we haven't actually. Soren turned and walked past him to the next cabinet. Right. Okay. That was that. The hours moved slowly. They worked in the same room without exchanging a single thing. But Malachi started noticing details he hadn't been looking for. The way Soren positioned himself whenever someone passed the open doorway, always with a clear line to the exit. The way he paused before responding to any instruction from senior staff, not out of confusion, but like he was choosing, deciding whether or not to comply. Malachi had worked with shy people, introverted people, people who just didn't want to talk. This wasn't that. This was something else entirely. And he couldn't name it. Around midday, he tried one more time. Slid a folded piece of paper across the table. A habit from working with a younger sibling who sometimes didn't want to talk either. He'd written, "You don't have to answer, I'm just saying hi." Soren looked at it. Looked at Malachi. And then turned back to his work. Malachi crumpled the paper and shoved it in his pocket. Fine. He got it. But then, an hour later, when the afternoon shift started winding down and the stress of the day had piled up behind both their eyes, Malachi caught it. He wasn't even looking directly. Soren's hands? Just barely. Just for a moment. They trembled, a small, controlled shake that lasted less than 3 seconds before Soren pressed his fingers flat against the shelf and made it stop. Like he'd done it 100 times. Like he knew exactly how to put the lid back on. Malachi pretended he hadn't seen it. But he had. And that night, passing the east corridor on his way back to the shared quarters, he heard Rydian's voice through a cracked door. Low, amused, talking to someone else. "Tomorrow," Rydian said. "I've been too patient. It's time to teach the mute one more lesson." Malachi stopped walking. The hallway was empty. The door was cracked. And whatever he'd been planning to say to himself, that it wasn't his business, that he needed this job, that people like Rydian didn't come after people like him, all of it went quiet. It started the same way the first time had. Too public. Too calm. Too deliberate. Rydian walked into the East Hall during the morning service window, when the staff were spread thin and the guests were still lounging, and made his way directly towards Soren like he'd had the destination in mind all morning. Soren was setting a table alone. Long cloth. Crystal. He didn't look up when Rydian approached. "You know what I realized?" Rydian said, settling into a chair nearby like he belonged there. "You've never actually reacted to anything I've said? Not once." He tilted his head. "That's not normal. That's broken." The word landed in the room and stayed there. Soren continued laying the silverware. Position by position. Rydian leaned forward. "Say something. Do something. Give me any reason to think there's a person under there." Still nothing. Malachi was across the room. He heard every word. His jaw tightened. He told himself to keep moving. He kept moving. But Rydian wasn't finished. He stood. Walked to the table. Picked up one of the folded napkins Soren had just placed and dropped it deliberately on the floor. Then waited. Soren bent to pick it up. Rydian dropped another one. "There we go," he said. "That's the roll." 2 of the nearby guests glanced over. One looked away fast. Nobody said a thing. Malachi stood at the far end of the hall with a cart of supplies and did nothing. He told himself it wasn't his call. That getting involved would cost him his job. That Soren had survived this before and would survive it again. The voice in his chest said something different. Louder. He ignored it. Then Rydian's hand moved. Slow, reaching towards Soren's collar, not rough, not yet, but deliberate. Possessive. The kind of touch designed to remind someone where they stood in the order of things. Soren's arm came up. Fast. Not swinging. Not striking. Just there. A clean, quiet block. His forearm met Rydian's wrist midair and stopped it cold. The whole table went still. Rydian blinked. Soren held the position for exactly 2 seconds. Then he lowered his arm, picked up the last napkin from the floor, and went back to setting the table like the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. The room sat in its own hell breath. Rydian's face shifted, surprise first. Then something uglier. Slower. He stepped back. Said nothing. Walked away. And Malachi finally exhaled. His hands were shaking slightly on the cart handle. He looked at Soren, who was already moving to the next place setting. He could have fought back the whole time. He chose not to. Malachi turned that over in his head and couldn't find a place to put it. Later, much later, after the hall had cleared and the estate had settled into its evening rhythms, Cale Morrow sat alone in his office with a single sheet of paper in his hand. His expression didn't shift. But his eyes moved across whatever was written on it twice. Then he folded it. Set it down. And stared at the wall for a long moment. It was the small things that didn't add up. Malachi started keeping a mental list without meaning to. The way Soren carried himself when no one was looking, spine straight, weight evenly distributed, always balanced. Not like someone trained to serve. Like someone trained for something else entirely. The way he moved through crowded rooms. Not around people. Through the spaces between them. Always taking the path with the clearest exit on the other side. Malachi worked with him 3 days in a row. Watched him stack, fold, carry, clean. And the whole time, he kept getting the feeling that he was watching someone perform a role they'd selected. Not someone who belonged in it. He mentioned it to no one. But on the 4th day, he saw something that pulled it all together in a way he wasn't ready for. Cale Morrow walked through the East Wing during the midday shift. He did that sometimes, walked the estate, spoke to senior staff, checked whatever it was men like him needed to check. Malachi had learned to step back and look busy when he passed. But this time, Cale's eyes didn't move to the staff schedule or the supply logs. They moved to Soren. And they stayed there. Not the way a boss watches an employee. Not checking posture or pace. Something else. The way someone watches a variable they haven't accounted for. Alert. Calculated. Like Soren was a problem he hadn't solved yet. Soren kept working. Didn't look up. Cale moved on. But Malachi caught it. And now he couldn't stop seeing things he hadn't noticed before. The inconsistencies. The tiny gaps where Soren's performance as a maid didn't quite align. The way he scanned rooms on entry. The way he cataloged people before engaging them. The way he knew exactly how far away from a window he was at any given moment. That night Malachi couldn't sleep. He got up around 2 in the morning to get water from the shared kitchen at the end of the corridor. The hallway was dark. Quiet. The kind of quiet that felt like the whole estate was held underwater. He pushed open the kitchen door. And stopped. Soren was sitting at the table. Still dressed. Not eating. Not reading. Just sitting. Eyes moving along the far wall in a slow, deliberate pattern that Malachi recognized after a second. He was tracing the floor plan. Exit routes. From memory. Malachi stood in the doorway and didn't say a word. Soren didn't look at him. But he knew he was there. He always knew when someone was there. Malachi turned to go back to bed. Then he saw it. a folded piece of paper on the edge of the counter. The corner was turned toward him. Deliberate. He picked it up. Unfolded it. 3 words in clean, controlled handwriting. Not safe here. Malachi read it twice. Then once more. He looked up, but Soren was already gone. It happened fast. The afternoon service ran late because a guest had added a last-minute gathering to the schedule. 20 people, East Ballroom, full service. Every available staff member got pulled in, including Soren. Malachi saw Rydian the moment he walked in. The expression on his face said the morning hadn't been enough. Soren was near the center of the room, carrying a full-length tray of drinks. He moved through the crowd smoothly, distributing glasses, turning on the precise coordinates of someone who had mapped the room on entry. Malachi tracked him from the side of the hall. Rydian watched him from near the fireplace. Then he started walking. The first thing he did was loud enough to be heard across the room. A comment, something about the quality of the service, aimed at no one in particular but placed directly in Soren's path. A few guests laughed. The nervous kind of laugh people give when they're not sure if they're watching something entertaining or something wrong. Soren kept moving. Rydian stepped in front of him. You ignored me this morning. His voice dropped. Not quieter, tighter. The kind of quiet that takes up more space. I don't get ignored. Soren stood still. Tray balanced. Eyes forward. Put that down, Rydian said. Soren didn't. The room had gone a kind of still where everyone was paying attention but pretending not to. Malachi's hand was on the cart. His feet were already turned toward the center of the room. Move, he told himself. Move right now. He didn't. Rydian shoved him. Not hard enough to send Soren to the floor, but enough. The tray tipped. Glasses hit the marble. The sound split the silence of the room open wide, and for one suspended second, everything stopped. Soren stood among the broken glass. Perfectly still. Eyes down. The whole room watched. Nobody breathed. And then, slowly, Soren raised his head. His eyes were calm. That was the thing that crawled under Malachi's skin and stayed there. Not wet. Not wide. Not the face of someone humiliated or afraid. Just still. The way deep water is still right before a current shifts beneath the surface. His breathing changed. Barely. Almost imperceptibly. But it changed. One slow inhale. Controlled. Deliberate. Like someone setting something down that they'd been carrying a long time. Malachi recognized that breath. He didn't know why. But he recognized it. Then a voice came from the doorway. Enough. Kale Morrow. He hadn't moved. Hadn't rushed in. He was standing exactly where he'd been, at the entrance of the ballroom, hands folded, watching. The word came out flat. No heat. No urgency. Just final. Rydian turned around slowly, smile still in place. Like he was deciding whether or not the instruction applied to him. Soren bent and picked up the tray. Set it upright. Calm. Unhurried. And Malachi stood in his corner, tray in hand, voice locked somewhere behind his teeth, and did nothing. Again. The word landed in his chest like a stone dropping into still water. Again. Soren's bed was made. That was the first thing Malachi noticed. Not empty, made. Corners folded. Pillows centered. Like someone had taken their time with it before leaving. Like they'd known they weren't coming back. The second thing he noticed was the silence. Not the normal morning quiet of shared quarters. This was different. The kind that settles into a room after something has already happened and the people left behind are still catching up. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he walked to the main staff area and asked the first person he saw where Soren was. The woman looked at him. Then away. Kept folding her linens. He asked someone else. Got the same answer. Which wasn't an answer at all. Soren was just gone. No incident report. No notice of departure. No explanation passed down through the chain of staff. Malachi went through the morning rotation like the floor under him had shifted 2 inches to the left, and nobody else had felt it. He kept expecting to turn a corner and find Soren at a supply station somewhere, quiet and unreachable as always. He didn't. By midday, the estate had settled into its regular rhythm like a body that had already processed and released something. Like Soren had never been a variable worth tracking. Malachi couldn't eat lunch. He sat in the break room with a plate in front of him and ran through the previous night in his head. The breath that had changed. The stillness in those eyes. The way Kale had said enough, too measured, too late, like a man trying to close a door that had already blown off its hinges. He should have done something. That thought had been sitting in the middle of his chest since the ballroom. It wasn't getting lighter. It was getting heavier. The specific, loaded weight of a moment you can't go back to. Around 2 in the afternoon, he passed Kale's office. The door was closed. That wasn't unusual. But the 2 security staff positioned outside it were. Malachi slowed his pace. Through the door, barely audible, he heard Kale's voice. Low. Measured. But tight around the edges in a way Malachi had never heard before. He kept walking. Then, just before dinner, the news broke through the estate like a current of cold air. Staff passed it to staff in lowered voices. Guests were kept separate. Whatever it was, it moved fast. A syndicate safe house in the East District. Destroyed overnight. No survivors. No confirmed entry point. No suspects. Malachi heard it the same way everyone else did, in fragments, second-hand, between tasks. And the whole time, he kept hearing it layered over one memory. 3 words. Clean handwriting. Left on a counter in the middle of the night. Not safe here. The footage wasn't meant for general staff. Someone had pulled it from the internal security system and passed it to Kale directly. Malachi only saw it because he was standing in the wrong corridor at the wrong moment when a door opened and a screen was left visible for exactly 4 seconds. That was enough. A single figure. Moving through the smoke of a destroyed room. Still wearing the uniform. Black dress, white apron, moving with the kind of precision that made the whole thing look rehearsed, not rushed, not desperate. Controlled. Like every motion had been calculated before the first one was taken. Malachi stood in that corridor for a long time after the door closed. His brain kept trying to lay the 2 images side by side, Soren folding linen at the supply station, and that figure on the screen, and kept refusing to let them merge. But they did. They fit exactly. The posture. The economy of movement. The way either version of him wasted anything. He wasn't missing. He'd never been missing. He'd left on purpose. And now Kale was in his office confirming what the footage already made clear. Malachi caught the tail end of it through a cracked door, Kale's voice, another man's voice responding, and then one sentence that landed like something dropped from a height. He was extracted from a cell operation 6 years ago. Sole survivor. The official record says he's dead. A pause. He's not dead. Malachi pressed his back to the wall outside the office. 6 years? Sole survivor. The Maid uniform. The silence. The way he blocked Rydian's wrist without thinking, fast, automatic, muscle memory fast, and then put his arm back down like it hadn't happened. And the way he'd let it all happen anyway. The napkins on the floor. The chin grab. The shove. He could have ended any one of those moments in under 2 seconds. He had the training for it. He chose not to. That mattered. Malachi turned that over slowly. It mattered a lot. Because a man who could fight back and doesn't. That isn't weakness. That's a decision. That's someone holding themselves to a line, right up until the line moves. Rydian had moved the line. And now the footage showed a trail. Not random. Not rage-driven. Each hit in the East District led to another location. Malachi watched Kale's security team map it on a board through a second door left open too long. Each point connected. Each one closer. The last mark on the board had a name beside it. Rydian Voss. The flood warning came through at dawn. Not a surprise, the East District had been under watch for 2 weeks. But the levee breach hit faster than projected, and by 7 in the morning, 2 neighborhoods were underwater and every available emergency channel in the city was screaming. It was perfect cover. Malachi figured that out about 10 minutes after Kale walked into the staff area, looked directly at him, and said, "You're coming with me." No explanation. No context. Just that. They moved through the city in 2 vehicles, Kale's team in one, Malachi wedged into a rear seat in the other, watching the streets outside the windows shift from estate neighborhoods into flood-damaged ones. Water ankle-deep in some blocks. Waist-deep in others. The kind of damage that moved people indoors and cleared the roads of anyone who didn't have a reason to be outside. Kale was tracking something on his phone the entire ride. Malachi watched him from the corner of his eye. The man's expression hadn't changed, same controlled stillness as always. But his jaw was tight. And he checked the phone with just enough frequency to give something away. He was worried. That was new. They stopped at a half-collapsed building on the edge of the flooded district. The ground floor was wet. The upper levels looked intact. Kale's team fanned out, 2 to the perimeter, 1 to the stairwell, and Kale went in without waiting for clearance. Malachi followed. The second floor smelled like smoke and standing water, and something older underneath. They moved through 3 rooms before Kale stopped. On the floor of the far room, 3 people were sitting against the wall. Civilians, an older man, 2 kids, wrapped in what looked like a torn curtain. Dry. Bandaged. Someone had made sure of that. One of the kids was holding a small folded cloth. White. With a black trim. A piece of an apron. Malachi stared at it. Kale crouched in front of the older man. "Who was here?" The man looked at him for a moment, then back at the cloth in the kid's hands. "A young man. Quiet. He didn't say anything, just, he got them out of the water. Wrapped them up. Left that so they'd have something dry for the girl's hands." He paused. "He went back down. Said there were more?" Kale stood. Didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Where did he go after?" The man pointed east. They moved. 2 blocks down. 1 block over. Through a street where water came up to Malachi's knees and the current pulled sideways. And then they heard it, not a struggle, not a confrontation, just silence. The specific, loaded kind. They rounded a corner. Soren was standing in the middle of a cleared lot, water around his ankles, the Maid uniform soaked through and torn at the shoulder. He wasn't moving. In front of him, sitting on a raised concrete platform, pale, shaking, still in the same white jacket from the ballroom. Rydian Voss. Alive. Nobody moved. The water pulled around their ankles. The city made noise somewhere far behind them. But here, in this specific square of space, everything was suspended. Rydian looked like he hadn't slept. His jacket was ruined. There was a cut above his left eyebrow that had dried without being treated. He was sitting with both arms wrapped around his own knees, which was the smallest Malachi had ever seen anyone try to make themselves look. He was alive. Soren hadn't touched him. Kale stepped forward slowly. His eyes moved between them, reading the space, calculating. He stopped about 4 feet back. Malachi stayed behind him. Soren's back was to them. He didn't turn around. He already knew they were there. Kale spoke first. Soren. Nothing. The people in the building, you pulled them out. A beat. Then a single, small nod. And him? No answer. But Soren's shoulders shifted slightly. Not toward Rydian. Just inward. Like he was holding something in that had a lot of weight to it. Malachi looked at Rydian. The man's eyes were fixed on Soren's back. There was no arrogance left in his face. No performance. Just a person sitting in the rain, alone with whatever the last 12 hours had shown him. Then Malachi stepped forward. He didn't plan it. His feet just moved. He came around Kale's right side and kept walking until he was standing where Soren could see him. Not in front of him. Just close enough that it counted. I didn't say anything, Malachi said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. But steady. In the ballroom. The first time. The second time. I stood there and I watched, and I told myself it wasn't my place, that I'd lose my job, that you'd been through it before and could handle it again. He stopped. That was wrong. I knew it was wrong while I was doing it. And I didn't stop. The water moved around them. Soren turned. Slowly. He looked at Malachi directly. No catalog, no calculation. Just present. Fully present, for the first time since Malachi had met him. And what was in his face wasn't anger. Wasn't forgiveness either. It was something rawer than both of those things. He was tired. Not tired like he needed sleep. Tired the way people get when they've been holding the same weight for years without anyone offering to take even the edge of it. Malachi held the look. Didn't blink. Didn't qualify it. Just let it sit there, the apology, the guilt, the fact that he'd seen it, and said nothing, and let Soren decide what to do with it. Kale hadn't moved. Rydian hadn't moved. Soren's jaw worked once. Twice. Something was happening behind his face that hadn't happened in that ballroom, or the East Wing, or the morning service, or any of the moments Malachi had watched him take the weight of someone else's cruelty without flinching. His eyes went wet. Not crying. Not yet. Just the surface of something breaking. He looked at Rydian. Long quiet. Then he looked back at the lot around them. At the water. At the city that had been falling apart all morning. And he turned. And walked away. Not fast. Not fleeing. Just done. Moving with the same economy he always moved with, but different now. Lighter somehow. Like he'd set something down in this flooded lot and left it there. Malachi watched him go. Then looked back at Rydian, still sitting on that concrete platform. Rydian's mouth opened. Closed. Nothing came out. There was nothing to say. 3 weeks later, Malachi's sister sat up in her hospital bed on her own for the first time. It wasn't dramatic. She just pushed herself upright, asked for water, and complained that the pillow was flat. Malachi stood at the door of the room for 10 solid seconds before he trusted his legs enough to walk in. He sat with her for 2 hours. Didn't talk much. She did most of it. About the nurses, about a show she'd been watching on the tablet, about whether he'd been eating enough because he looked thin. He told her she was one to talk. She threw the flat pillow at him. He drove back to the estate in the evening. Things had shifted there too. Slowly. Quietly. The way a room changes temperature without anyone touching the thermostat. Rydian Voss had not returned. His guest suite was cleared out the week after the flood. No announcement. No scene. Just gone. The estate staff noted it and moved on. Cale had been different. Not softer, exactly. More present. He'd had 2 staff meetings in as many weeks, actual meetings, not orders passed down through supervisors. He'd walked the morning service himself twice. Made eye contact. Listened when someone brought a concern instead of looking through them. Small things. But they added up. Malachi thought about the night in his office. The tight jaw. The phone checked one too many times. The way the word enough had come out 2 beats late. He thought Cale had known, on some level, for a while, what he'd been allowing. And that he'd have to carry that in his own way. He was carrying it. That mattered. Malachi was organizing the East Wing supply room, alone, the way he'd been that first week before the assignments changed, when the door opened. He turned. Soren. Different clothes. Dark jacket. No uniform. He looked like himself. Or maybe for the first time, just like himself, without the performance layered on top. He crossed the room and stood a few feet away. Then reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the shelf between them. A folded piece of paper. Malachi looked at it. Then at him. Then picked it up. 2 lines. The first, "Thank you for saying it." The second, "I needed to hear that it mattered." Malachi folded the paper. Held it. He didn't say anything grand. Didn't reach for something that would ruin it. He just looked at Soren, this man who had survived things Malachi didn't have words for, who had chosen restraint when he had every reason not to, who had pulled strangers out of floodwater in a torn uniform and left before anyone could thank him, and nodded once. Slow. Certain. Like a promise without the noise. Soren held the look for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved, barely, almost nothing, but it was there. He turned toward the door. Stopped with one hand on the frame. Didn't look back. But he didn't leave immediately either. Just stood there for one breath, 2, like someone at the end of a long road, taking a second before the next one starts. Then he walked out. And for the first time since he'd stepped foot in this estate, Malachi didn't feel like he was standing in someone else's story. He felt like he'd earned his place in this one. If this story moved you. The silence, the weight of doing nothing, the moment someone finally chooses differently, leave a comment and tell us which chapter hit you hardest. These are the stories that remind us what accountability actually looks like. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that makes you think, feel, and see people differently. Share this with someone who needs it today.